The smell of lilac and betrayal hangs heavy in this house. They think I'm just a fixture now, an old vase gathering dust in the corner of their perfect, expensive life. They've forgotten that vases can shatter, and when they do, the shards are sharp. I saw the look in their eyes today, the one that says, "When will she finally be gone?" They have no idea how wrong they are. I'm not leaving. I'm just getting started. This isn't just my story. It's my meticulously planned final act. My name is Beatrice Sterling, and I am 72 years old. This house, the one they call theirs now, was built with my husband's sweat and my own careful savings. We moved into this quiet, tree-lined suburb of Denver back in 1975, when the oak trees were saplings and the mortgage felt like a mountain only we could climb. For 40 years, this was the safe harbor, the place where we raised our son, Marcus, where we shared dinners that lasted for hours, and where my husband, Samuel, eventually took his last, rattling breath. Samuel died 3 years ago. The silence he left behind was a physical thing, a cold, heavy blanket that settled over the entire house. It's funny how quickly grief can turn a home into a monument, and then a liability. That's when they arrived. Marcus and his wife, Talia. They didn't come to grieve with me. They came to assess the property. "Mom, the house is just too much for you now," Marcus said. Not a question, but a pronouncement, delivered with the forced sincerity he uses when he's about to ask for a large sum of money, or, in this case, my entire life. Talia, always the sleek, calculating one, added, "It's about your well-being, Beatrice. This place is huge. The yard alone. You need to downsize. Maybe a nice, bright condo closer to the city where you can be active." She painted a picture of freedom, but all I heard was the sound of my history being whitewashed. What they really meant was, "We want the house. It's prime real estate. Sell it, and the inheritance is immediately accessible, clean, and in cash." I knew what they were doing. Samuel and I had been clear. The house was to be held in trust for me with a life estate. Only upon my death would Marcus inherit it. We did that because we knew our son. Marcus has always had a knack for spending money he hasn't earned, and Talia has a knack for finding things to spend it on. I refused. Plain and simple. "This is my home, Marcus. Your father and I made plans. I'm staying." That's when the campaign began. It wasn't a fierce battle. It was a slow, agonizing siege. It started with subtle dismissals, then escalated to controlling measures, all under the guise of caring for Mom. They convinced me to give Marcus power of attorney for my finances. "Just until you're back on your feet, Mom," he promised. "It's for the accounts, the bills, so you don't have to worry." I was still reeling from Samuel's death, exhausted and trusting. My fatal mistake. Within a year, they had moved in. Their story was that Talia's consultancy firm in the city was struggling, and they needed to save money by consolidating. They filled the guest suite with their possessions, designer clothes, framed diplomas, and a cold, modern aesthetic that clashed violently with my comfortable antiques. The next thing I knew, they were replacing my appliances, then my carpets. Then they were calling it theirs. "We need to update the kitchen, Beatrice." "It's so 1980s, Talia announced one morning over my instant coffee, wrinkling her nose as if she'd smelled something unpleasant. "I like my kitchen," I said, looking at the solid oak cabinet Samuel had installed himself. "It's not about what you like. It's about the resale value." "Mom," Marcus corrected, immediately stepping in. He spoke to me like a tired manager speaking to a difficult employee. That word, resale, cut me to the quick. My finances quickly became a knot I couldn't untangle. Marcus's power of attorney meant he could move money freely. Soon, the monthly statements showed significant management fees and house maintenance costs. I tried to question him, but he'd simply sigh, roll his eyes, and show me a thick stack of invoices for things I never approved. A new security system, a massive irrigation repair, a consultation fee for a financial planner I'd never met. "You don't understand modern finance, Mom. Everything is digital now. Just trust me. I'm protecting your assets." His words were supposed to be comforting, but they tasted like ash. The worst offense, the one that cemented my shift from a grieving mother to a woman plotting war, happened 6 months ago. I found a small locked metal box in the back of my closet, tucked beneath a stack of my late husband's old camping gear magazines. It contained my mother's wedding ring, a few old letters, and the original will Samuel and I had signed. The will stated unequivocally that upon my death, the entire estate, including the house, the retirement accounts, and all other assets, would be split 60-40 between Marcus and his sister. Audrey, my sweet daughter, is a nurse practitioner living in Seattle. She chose a life of modest means and honest work. We always knew she was the more responsible one. Marcus never forgave us for that 60-40 split. He always believed as the son he deserved the lion's share. I confronted Marcus with the will. "What is this, Marcus? I thought you were supposed to get this house after I pass." He looked at the paper, his face instantly guarded. "Oh, that old thing? It's completely outdated, Mom. We had the attorneys revise it after Dad passed. You signed the new documents. Remember the estate planning update last year?" I didn't remember. Not clearly. I remembered being tired, signing a stack of papers at the dining table. Marcus guiding my hand to the signature lines, saying, "This just cleans up the tax structure. Mom, it simplifies things." I looked closer at the date. The revision was signed 6 weeks after Samuel's funeral. I called the law firm. They confirmed a new will was on file, signed and notarized, naming Marcus as the sole beneficiary and removing Audrey entirely. The original 60-40 will was superseded. My blood turned to ice. I knew then that they had not only taken my house and my money, they had erased my daughter's future, capitalizing on my shock and grief to trick me into disinheriting my own child. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had stolen from the entire family. That night, lying awake in the room that now felt like a prison cell, I made a promise to myself. They had taken my life savings and my peace. They would not take my dignity, and they would certainly not get away with stealing Audrey's inheritance. The next morning, I started researching. I didn't trust lawyers anymore. I went to the local library, found an old, dusty laptop, and began learning. Not about tax codes or trusts, but about digital forensics, about evidence, about revenge. My plan needed 2 things: access and time. Access was easy. I was still their doting elderly mother puttering around the house. They left their laptops open, their cell phones charging unattended. They didn't see me as a threat. They saw me as a faded photograph. Time was harder. I had to appear weak, compliant. I started asking Talia for simple favors, like help buttoning my coat or reading a street sign. I'd pretend to forget a word, searching the air with my hand, just to lower their guard further. Last month, I struck. Marcus's laptop was charging in the living room. He was out golfing, and Talia was at her firm. I had exactly 45 minutes. I slipped on a pair of rubber gloves, no prints, and sat down. I didn't try to hack their bank account. That would be too messy, too traceable. Instead, I went for the thing they valued most, the thing they believed was untouchable: their reputation. I found a folder on Marcus's desktop simply labeled, "The Client." It was a trove of communication about his current job as a mid-level executive at a major tech company. I didn't read the content. I simply ran a small open-source program I'd learned about at the library, a data mining tool. I copied every email, every presentation, every draft document onto a tiny military-grade USB drive I'd bought online. Then, I closed the folder, deleted the browsing history, and put the laptop back exactly as I found it. The USB drive is now nestled inside a hollowed-out ceramic hummingbird on my bedside table. It contains their professional lives, but the real game is in their personal lives. Talia is obsessed with appearances. Her consultancy, The Gilded Compass, is her entire identity. It projects an image of sharp success and exclusivity, financed, I now suspect, by my retirement fund. I need to expose the rot underneath that guilt. Today is Monday. Marcus and Talia left for work at 7:15 a.m. I heard the Tesla pull out of the driveway, the sound of my stolen comfort disappearing down the street. I waited until 8 a.m., poured a second cup of coffee, and walked into their master bathroom. Talia is meticulous. She leaves nothing out of place, except for her phone. It was charging on her vanity, unlocked. She has a poor habit of setting a short screen lock timer. I only needed a minute. I downloaded a basic call and text history onto my own burner phone, focusing on the last 6 months. Then I opened her social media. Not to post anything, but to silently observe her private messages. And there it was. A consistent, flirtatious exchange with a man named Victor from Miami. "Can't wait for our strategy meeting next month, darling." "He'll never know," I smiled. A slow, chilling smile that I haven't felt since Samuel was alive. They think they are the only ones capable of secrets. They think I'm just an old woman waiting for the end. This is where the game changes. They want the house. I want their lives. And I now have the key to their deepest, most private vulnerabilities. I am not looking for justice. I am seeking retribution. And retribution, when it is served cold, is truly a dish best enjoyed alone. The next phase requires delicate maneuvering. I need to turn their own tools, their technology, their deceit, their desire for material wealth, against them. The house is the stage, and I am the director. They have no idea that the mother they dismissed has been promoted to their judge and executioner. The ceramic hummingbird on my nightstand feels cool and smooth under my fingers, a tiny monument to their arrogance. The USB drive inside it, and the burner phone with Talia's texts, are not just evidence. They're my collateral. I spent the last 3 days studying them, letting their lies sink in, not as painful revelations, but as tactical advantages. Marcus's professional emails are a goldmine of corporate hypocrisy. He's been working on a massive acquisition deal for the tech company where he's an executive. His internal communications, particularly with his direct reports, show a pattern of manipulation, suppressing concerns about the target company's shaky financial disclosures to ensure the deal goes through and he gets his large end-of-year bonus. He calls it managing expectations. I call it fraud. It's all here. The internal memos with the real numbers, the drafts of his presentations carefully omitting those numbers, and the instructions to his team to bury the dissenting opinions in endless data appendices. Talia's deception, meanwhile, is purely emotional, but its potential fallout is far wider. The texts with Victor from Miami confirm an affair. Not a one-time mistake, but a months-long arrangement, complete with coded language about strategy meetings and client dinners that always ended with an address near South Beach. The most recent message confirmed their next rendezvous is set for 3 weeks from now. Talia's reputation as the sharp, family-focused CEO of her boutique consulting firm is about to crack under the weight of her deceit. My first move had to be subtle, untraceable, and designed to create internal stress in their lives. A pressure cooker. They think the only threat they face is me tripping down the stairs. I needed them to start looking at each other. I focused on the house. Their precious, updated, high resale value house. Last night, after they retired to the master suite, the one that used to be Samuel's and mine, I executed the first phase. I went into the main breaker panel in the garage. I didn't cut the power. That's too crude. Instead, I had researched how to induce subtle, intermittent electrical stress. I found a way to slightly, surgically loosen the connection on the primary circuit, leading to their smart thermostat and their newly installed media center. Just enough to cause random, brief power fluctuations, but nothing an electrician could immediately diagnose without extensive testing. This morning, the results were instantaneous. "Mom, did you hear that?" Marcus's voice boomed from the living room, laced with annoyance. The TV reset again. Talia, always practical, replied, "The smart thermostat is off too. It says it lost power for a second." That's the 3rd time this week. I shuffled into the living room, feigning confusion. Oh dear. Maybe the storms? We never had these issues with the old system, did we? Marcus immediately snapped. "It's the aging infrastructure of this house, Mom. It's ancient. We told you we needed to rewire the whole thing. But no, we had to keep it authentic." He shot a bitter look at the original crown molding. "Talia, ever the problem solver, pulled out her phone. "I'm calling a technician right now." "This is ridiculous. Our media system alone cost $10,000. Perfect. They were blaming the house, they were blaming its age, and implicitly, they were blaming me for their problems. The technician arrived 2 hours later. He spent an hour checking the fuse box, the wall outlets, and the modem. He found nothing definitive. "It's intermittent, sir. Could be a loose wire in the wall, could be a regional grid fluctuation. Call me when it happens again." The uncertainty was the real weapon. It forced them to doubt the stability of their environment. Every time a light flickered, a screen blinked, or the AC cut out for 2 seconds, their expensive modern lives were interrupted. They became irritable, snapping at each other over trivial things. "Did you remember to pay that quarterly HOA fee, Marcus? They're threatening a lien." "And I don't need a lien when I'm trying to close the deal on the Scottsdale property," Talia hissed one evening as the lights flickered during their argument. "I've been busy, Talia. Maybe if you weren't so focused on Miami, you could check the mail yourself," Marcus retorted, not realizing the irony of his own careless words. This minor stress was just background noise, though. My next move needed to be direct, targeting the source of their betrayal, the revised will. I needed to know the notary. I remembered the day they made me sign the new documents. Marcus had brought a notary to the house, a young woman in a sharp blazer and dark spectacles. He had paid her in cash right there at the dining table. It had felt wrong, even in my fog of grief, but I had trusted my son. Now I needed her identity. It took me 2 evenings sitting in the dark, cool library to find it. I went through the trash, carefully sifting through shredded paper, wearing gloves, separating the damp coffee grounds from the legal refuse. I found a tiny corner of a receipt, not much bigger than a thumbnail. On it, the number sequence, 987-124-77. It was too long for a phone number. Then I remembered Marcus mentioning that the notary was a mobile notary. I cross-referenced the number against public state records for licensed notaries in Denver County. On the 3rd attempt, I found a match. Lila Chen, license number 987-124-77. Her business was called The Swift Sign. Now I had a name, and more importantly, a physical address listed on her public records. A small condo complex not far from here. I knew Marcus must have paid her well for her services. Services that likely involved notarizing a document for a woman who was half-conscious with grief and confusion. Notaries are required to confirm the signee's mental capacity. If I could get to Lila Chen, I could potentially invalidate the will. I couldn't call her. Marcus could easily intercept the records on my landline or find the burner phone. I had to meet her face-to-face where I could use my greatest weapon, my appearance of frailty and my core of steel. I planned the meeting for a Friday afternoon. Marcus was scheduled to be in a long internal meeting, and Talia was hosting an event at her firm. I told them I was meeting a friend from my old bridge club. Marcus barely looked up from his iPad. "That's nice, Mom. Be back before dark." I dressed carefully. Not like a rich widow, but like a forgetful, slightly disheveled old lady. A cardigan buttoned wrong, a slight smudge of powder on my cheek, and my purse clutched tightly to my chest. I took a cab, not a rideshare, because I didn't want a digital trail, and paid the driver in $20 bills I had kept hidden in an old teapot for emergencies. Lila Chen's building was clean but anonymous. I found her apartment on the 2nd floor. I knocked gently, then waited. A young woman with sharp eyes and an immediately weary demeanor opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked, already looking like she wanted to close the door. I put on my best performance. My voice trembled slightly. "Ms. Chen, Lila, I hope I have the right person. I'm Beatrice Sterling. I believe you notarized a very important document for my son, Marcus Sterling, a while ago." It was about my husband's estate. Her face went from guarded to pale. The recognition was instant. "Ma'am, I sign hundreds of documents. I really can't discuss client business." She moved to block the door. I leaned forward conspiratorially, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "It was last year, 6 weeks after the funeral. You came to the house. He paid you $300 in cash. You remember the date, Lila. It was an updated will. My signature was messy. I was still on medication. The color drained from her cheeks. She remembered. The amount of cash, the recent funeral. These were the details that stood out in a blur of endless signatures. Look, Mrs. Sterling, I followed protocol. The client stated you were of sound mind, and you did sign the document. Her voice was defensive but weak. I reached into my pocket, not for a weapon, but for a simple folded check. Not a check from my account, which Marcus monitors, but a check I'd had Samuel pre-sign years ago for a potential charity donation. It was old but valid. I had filled in the amount $5,000. I pushed it gently into her hand. Lila, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I just need you to be honest. Did Marcus rush you? Did you observe me carefully? Or did he simply tell you I was fine and you took the cash and left? I stared at her, not with anger, but with the hollow, defeated look of a betrayed mother. She looked from the check to my face. The amount was a month's rent for her. The silence in the hallway was thick. He told me you had a bad cold, ma'am, that you were easily tired. He kept bringing you water. He positioned himself between us most of the time. I saw you sign it, but yes, he was very rushed. He said he'd pay extra for a discreet fast service. She swallowed hard, crumpling the check nervously. Was there anything else, Lila? Anything at all that felt off? I pressed. She bit her lip, then sighed, defeated by the mix of guilt and the $5,000 in her hand. Only one thing. After you signed, he quickly gathered the papers. But I saw an older copy, an original will, sitting on the table. When he saw me looking at it, he immediately took it and shredded it right there in his briefcase shredder. He was very nervous about that old copy. My heart hammered. Shredded. The original 60-40 will naming Audrey. He hadn't just changed the will. He had systematically tried to destroy the evidence of the previous one, afraid that even a voided copy might be used against him. Thank you, Lila, I whispered, taking my hand away from the check. You've helped me more than you know. Just forget I was here. I turned and walked away, leaving the young notary frozen in her doorway. The $5,000 was a small price to pay for what I now possessed, a credible witness. Lila Chen would be my key to unlocking the fraud and restoring Audrey's name to the inheritance. The next step was to move the fight from the house to the courtroom, but not through official channels, not yet. I needed to use this information to make Marcus sweat, to break his composure, and to make him reveal the full extent of his schemes to Talia. Their downfall must be synchronized, a perfect collapse. Lila Chen's confession confirmed the scope of Marcus's treachery. He hadn't just used my grief. He had actively destroyed the evidence of Audrey's inheritance. That moment in Lila's hallway was a watershed. I stopped being a victim gathering proof and became an agent ready to strike. The time for subtle electrical failures and anonymous meetings was over. I needed to move the fight from the periphery to the center of their lives. My revenge had to be surgical, hitting their vulnerabilities in sequence, first Marcus's career and then Talia's reputation. I wanted them to realize their carefully constructed world was collapsing, and I wanted them to see the source of the destruction only when it was too late. The next morning, I began the preparations for Marcus's professional demise. I knew my primary leverage was the data on the USB drive. The internal memos proving he was deliberately suppressing the target company's financial issues to secure his acquisition bonus. A simple anonymous email to his company's ethics hotline would work, but it would be too clean. Marcus is a master of damage control. He'd spin it as a misunderstanding or worse, blame a disgruntled subordinate. I needed to make the information public and undeniable, hitting the core of his professional identity. I remembered something Talia had mentioned dismissively. Marcus was scheduled to give a keynote presentation at a major industry conference in 2 weeks, the Denver Tech Summit. It was his moment to shine, the crowning achievement that would solidify his executive position and, presumably, lead to a massive promotion and even bigger bonuses he could then siphon from my accounts. I decided the summit would be the stage for his downfall. I spent the next week at the library, using the same dusty laptop. I accessed the conference's website. They had a digital submission portal for last-minute speaker slides. I cloned Marcus's original presentation, the perfectly polished, misleading version from his laptop when he was in the shower. I then created a single final slide. It was a simple black background with stark white text titled, "The Real Numbers." On that slide, I meticulously placed two side-by-side charts. The left chart showed the inflated, approved acquisition valuation he planned to present. The right chart showed the suppressed, real internal financial projection from the USB drive, showing a massive, undisclosed liability. Below the charts, I typed 3 lines. Internal memo. 10/18/2025, bury the dissent. Focus on the bonus. Monsieur Sterling. I saved the fraudulent slide under a generic name and replaced the original final slide in Marcus's presentation file on his desktop. I made sure the file name and modification date matched his other slides perfectly. The only difference was that his final, crucial slide was now my act of corporate sabotage. I knew he was too arrogant and too rushed to reread his entire 30-page presentation before the summit. He'd trust the file on his desktop. While Marcus was unknowingly preparing his own public humiliation, I shifted my focus to Talia. Her affair with Victor from Miami was set to reach its peak in a week. I needed to ensure Marcus discovered it in the most painful, public, and embarrassing way possible, shattering her professional image and, crucially, causing a rift so wide they couldn't possibly conspire together anymore. I used the burner phone to study Talia's routine. She had a habit of leaving her laptop open in her home office when she went out for her morning gym session. She used a cloud-based calendar service, sharing her work appointments with Marcus so they could coordinate their busy schedules. On Sunday night, I waited until they were asleep. I walked into Talia's office. Her laptop was open, the screen locked, but the computer still running. I bypassed the lock using a simple peripheral trick I learned, plugging in the USB drive, which I had programmed with a basic script, allowed me to access her cloud calendar directly without needing her password. It was a loophole only someone with physical access and infinite patience could exploit. I located the week she was traveling to Miami. Her calendar simply read, "Client Strategy Meeting, Miami." I edited the event. I changed the title to Victor, South Beach Resort. I changed the privacy setting from private to public shared with Marcus. And I changed the reminder notification to send a large, obvious alert to Marcus's work phone 20 minutes before she was due to check into the hotel. Crucially, I also added a picture. I went to the internet, found a stock photo of a beachside resort pool, and set it as the background image for the calendar entry. The visual impact would ensure Marcus couldn't ignore the notification. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. I deleted the access logs on the laptop, unplugged the USB drive, and returned to the office exactly to the state I found it. With both traps set, the professional one for Marcus and the personal one for Talia, I retired to my room to wait. My role now was to be the perfectly docile, oblivious mother-in-law. The next 2 weeks were agonizing. The electrical problems I'd created continued to plague them. They had a second technician out who suggested a full, expensive house rewire, a suggestion Marcus immediately dismissed as a scam, deepening his resentment toward the ancient house. Then came the day of the tech summit. Marcus was nervous, adjusting his tie in front of the hallway mirror. "Wish me luck, Mom," he said, forcing a smile. "This is a big one. It's going to cement the acquisition." "I'm sure you'll be wonderful, dear," I replied, patting his arm. My touch was cold, but he didn't notice. He saw an old woman supporting her son. I saw the man walking into his own execution. I spent the day glued to the local news channels, waiting for a trickle of information. The summit was too niche for live television, but I knew the industry blogs and finance sites would be buzzing. The news broke at 4:30 p.m. It wasn't a trickle. It was a flood. An alert popped up on my library computer. Breaking: Sterling executive's presentation halted mid-speech. Acquisition deal in jeopardy. The article detailed the chaos. Marcus had reached his final slide, the dramatic climax of his presentation. The slide had appeared on the massive screen behind him, but it wasn't his polished conclusion. It was the black screen with the damning white text, the real numbers, and the chart exposing the $80 million liability he had concealed. The crowd, investors, analysts, and competitors had erupted. Marcus had stared at the screen, his face white, convinced the conference tech team had made a mistake. He tried to backtrack, but the damage was irreversible. The article included a blurry cell phone photo of the slide, with the quote prominently displayed, "Internal memo. 10/18/2025, bury the dissent. Focus on the bonus. Beatrice Sterling." His company's stock immediately halted trading. By the time Marcus drove home, he was no longer an executive. He was a corporate scapegoat. He stormed through the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. It was a hack, Mom. A corporate espionage attack. Someone got into my file. He was pacing, tearing at his collar, his face a grotesque mask of rage and fear. I simply looked up from my crossword puzzle. Oh dear, technology is so complicated these days, isn't it, Marcus? This isn't about technology, Mom. This is my career. They've put me on immediate unpaid leave pending an internal investigation. The bonus is gone. The stock options are worthless. I let him rave. The anger was delicious, but the fear was the nutrient I needed. He was so consumed by his own crisis that he wouldn't notice the second bomb dropping. The second bomb was scheduled to drop 3 days later, on a Wednesday at 10:45 a.m., exactly 20 minutes before Talia was due to check into the South Beach resort. I smiled. The revenge was now cascading. Marcus's explosion had been deeply satisfying. For a man who built his life on control and calculation, watching him unravel over a few strategically placed lines of code was the sweetest kind of victory. He spent the next 2 days oscillating between frantic phone calls to his lawyer and fits of self-pity, convinced he was the victim of a targeted industrial sabotage. The beautiful thing was, he was so focused on the corporate drama that he completely ignored the domestic sphere. He didn't even notice Talia packing. Wednesday morning dawned cool and crisp. Talia was a picture of professional calm, wearing a crisp white blazer and carrying a sleek leather carry-on. She announced her departure at breakfast. "I'm heading to the airport now," she said, carefully buttering her toast. "Big client meeting in Miami. I might be gone 3 or 4 days." Marcus, hunched over his cold coffee and a stack of legal papers, merely grunted. "Fine, just keep your phone charged. I need to know what the lawyers say about this corporate espionage garbage." "Always," Talia purred, giving him a quick, dry kiss on the cheek. She then gave me a cursory wave. "Bye, Beatrice. Take care of yourself." "I always do, dear," I replied, sipping my tea. I watched from the window as the Tesla, paid for with Samuel's money, pulled away. The second part of the plan was a precision strike, timed to hit 20 minutes before Talia's scheduled check-in. This was the moment Marcus would receive the calendar notification on his phone, not his personal one, which he often silenced, but his work phone, which he kept active for urgent calls about his investigation. I waited until 10:30 a.m. Marcus was in the living room, trying to force the faulty smart TV to play his favorite financial news channel, still muttering about the house's ancient infrastructure. At 10:45 a.m., his work phone, sitting on the glass coffee table, buzzed loudly. Marcus snatched it up, annoyed at the interruption. His face, already blotchy from stress, went utterly still. The phone was a large screen, and even from my armchair across the room I could see the image. A sunny beach resort. And the text was undeniable. "What? What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He was staring at the calendar notification I had created. Victor, South Beach Resort. I lowered my knitting, feigning concern. "What is it, Marcus? Did the lawyers call?" He didn't answer. He was rapidly scrolling through the calendar entry details, confirming the location, the check-in time, 11:05 a.m., and the shared setting. I knew the notification had pulled up the last 6 months of their shared calendar, highlighting all the client strategy meetings that were now clearly labeled as trysts with Victor. "That bitch!" he roared, throwing the phone across the room. It hit the wall and slid down, the screen cracking silently. "Miami! Client meeting my ass!" "She's cheating on me," The sudden shift from professional victimhood to personal betrayal was spectacular. He wasn't focused on the money or the house. He was focused on his shattered ego. "Calm down, dear. Who is Victor?" I asked gently, my voice soft, almost hesitant. "I don't know. Some idiot from Miami. This whole time." The boutique wasn't struggling, was it? She was setting up her future. "Her whole firm is a shell." He started pacing violently, kicking the sofa leg. This was the opening I needed. I allowed a look of deep, sorrowful realization to cross my face. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, Do you think Talia was involved in the will? The new will you had me sign?" He stopped dead. The question struck him like a physical blow, connecting his two separate disasters. "What?" he snarled. "What are you talking about?" "I handled the will. It was about protecting us." "No, dear. It was about protecting you," I corrected, shaking my head sadly. "But think about it. The original will, the one that gave Audrey 40%? You told me you shredded it, but you seemed so nervous that day. 6 weeks after your father died. I was barely aware of what I was doing. The notary was rushed, and now your career is ruined, and she's in Miami with another man. Don't you see the pattern?" I let the suggestion hang in the air, allowing the seeds of doubt to bloom. Marcus's greatest weakness is his overwhelming need to believe he is the smartest person in the room. The idea that his unfaithful wife had been playing him all along was far more maddening than the idea that I, his elderly mother, had. She must have done it. "She sabotaged the presentation," he stammered, his eyes wide with a new, terrifying conviction. "She found the files, Mom. She knew the acquisition was my big payout, and she ruined it to corner the assets. She's been working on this with that Victor guy." "But why, Marcus? Why would she want to ruin the acquisition if you two were together?" "Because she's leaving me. She needed me stripped of my corporate power so she could keep the house and the assets. And the will. She told me what to say to the notary. She orchestrated the whole thing. It was beautiful. I hadn't even named myself as the culprit, and he had completely transferred the blame for my acts of revenge onto his soon-to-be ex-wife. My plan had worked better than I'd hoped. They were now in total civil war. I pushed the next piece into place. "You need to fight this, Marcus. Not just the corporate espionage, but the financial fraud. You need to protect yourself, and you need to protect Audrey's inheritance. Your father would have wanted that, but the will is gone. She probably has the only copy of the new one hidden somewhere. She can hide a piece of paper, but she can't hide a witness," I said, leaning forward. "The notary, Lila Chen. I remember her name. You paid her $300 in cash. If we can get her to testify that you were rushing me, that I was confused, we can get the new will overturned. We can get Audrey her share." I had given him a mission that served both my long-term goals and his immediate need for retribution. He now saw himself as an avenging hero, fighting his traitorous wife and restoring justice to his family, all while conveniently forgetting he had been the one who drafted the fraudulent document. Marcus grabbed his car keys. His eyes were manic, focused on one thing. Revenge on Talia. Lila Chen. "I'll find her," he vowed. "I'll get her to testify. I'm going to sue that woman for everything she has. This is my house, and I will not let that cheating gold digger take it." "Be careful, dear," I warned, watching him rush out the door. "Talia is a clever woman." "Not as clever as I am, Mom," he scoffed, before speeding away in the Tesla to find Lila Chen. I waited until the car was out of sight, then calmly walked to the cracked phone on the floor. I picked it up. The screen, though broken, was still functioning. I opened the browser and typed in the number of Lila Chen's condo complex, found the general office number, and sent an anonymous text message from my burner phone. Text to Lila Chen. "Marcus Sterling, the man who paid you cash for the rushed notarization, is coming to your house now. He is unstable. Tell him you do not remember the details of the signing. Lie." Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of iced tea, and settled back to wait. Marcus was heading straight into a controlled confrontation. Lila, still clutching her $5,000, would be terrified and defensive. She would stick to her original, legally safe statement that she followed protocol and remembered nothing unusual, which would contradict everything Marcus had hoped for. He would hit a wall of legal denial. He would return home empty-handed, convinced that Talia had gotten to the notary first, sealing the conspiracy in his mind. The final breakdown, the total loss of control, was imminent. I was ready for the next move. The legal, irrefutable strike that would remove them both from my home forever. Marcus returned late that evening, not with the fire of the Avenger, but with the cold, damp fury of a cornered animal. He hadn't found the validation he sought from Lila Chen. He had found a brick wall. He slammed the door shut and stood in the entryway, looking like a poorly tailored suit on a broken man. "She lied, Mom," he choked out, his voice hoarse. "That notary Lila Chen, she played dumb. Said she signed hundreds of documents that month. Said I rushed her, but she insisted you were compos mentis and followed all protocols." She wouldn't budge. Talia got to her. She must have paid her off. I looked up from my book, a novel I was pretending to read. Paid her off? But how would Talia know you were going to see her? That's what I'm saying. It's a conspiracy. Talia ruined my career. She's cheating on me with that Miami slime, and now she's covering the legal track. She wants to seize the house the minute you're gone, and she's using that ridiculous estate update will to do it. He was losing the ability to distinguish between my actions and Talia's. My revenge was a perfectly delivered folie à deux. "Then you must fight the will, Marcus." "Not through the notary, but through the legal system itself," I said, my voice firming with a new, authoritative tone. "You need a lawyer who specializes in elder fraud and undue influence. A tough one who won't be scared off by Talia's corporate attorneys." "But who, Mom? Who can I trust? And where will I get the money? They've frozen my company accounts pending the investigation." I smiled internally. The money, the perfect leverage. "Your father and I had a contingency fund," I revealed, keeping my tone quiet and confidential. "He never trusted banks, you know that. He always kept a small safety net outside the main accounts, the ones you now control. It's not much, but it's enough for a retainer for a top lawyer." I led him to the master bedroom, the one that was now mine again. I walked to the back of my closet, reached behind a stack of old linens, and pulled out an antique wooden jewelry box. It wasn't the kind that held expensive jewels, but the kind that held sentiment. I opened the lid. Inside, beneath a few old costume necklaces, sat a thick, rubber-banded stack of crisp $100 bills. I had withdrawn the cash myself, piece by piece, from an old account Marcus didn't have power of attorney over. A tiny account I'd opened 20 years ago, specifically for emergency funds. It totaled $25,000. Marcus stared at the cash, his eyes wide. Greed and desperation warred on his face. $25,000, he whispered. "Is that all that's left?" "It's enough to start, Marcus. Enough to hire the best. But you have to do exactly as I say. This is my money, and it will be spent on my terms, to fight the fraudulent will and protect Audrey's inheritance." He nodded quickly, already calculating the lawyer's hourly rate. He was desperate and completely under my command. "First, you need to contact Audrey," I instructed. "She is the injured party. You must tell her everything. That you've been fooled by Talia, that you regret signing the new will, and that you are going to fight to restore her 40% share, even if you lose your 60% in the process." The request hit him hard. Asking Marcus to sacrifice his greed for his sister was like asking the sun to rise in the west, but he had no choice. "Why, Mom? Why bring Audrey into this now? If we win, she'll just complicate the settlement." "No," I said sternly. "You are an executive under criminal investigation. Talia is an adulterer under investigation for corporate fraud. The court will not trust either of you. Audrey is the only clean party. She is a dedicated nurse, your innocent sister. She must petition the court as the primary plaintiff, claiming undue influence and fraud. You will serve as the repentant witness, the son who was manipulated by his wicked wife." I had cast the roles perfectly. Audrey was the victim who demanded justice. Marcus was the reformed fool who assisted. And I was the vulnerable elderly mother. Marcus made the call later that night. I listened from the hallway. His voice was shaky, filled with forced humility and self-flagellation. He fabricated a story about Talia coercing him into the will update and how his love for his sister had driven him to expose the truth. Audrey, bless her good heart, was shocked, but ultimately moved by her brother's sudden remorse. She agreed to fly to Denver immediately and file the petition. My legal trap was set. Now for the grand, public humiliation. With Marcus focused on finding a lawyer and Talia sunning herself in Miami, I took my final decisive action. I went to my laptop and pulled up the remaining data on the USB drive, the confidential files of Marcus's tech company. I created 2 perfectly targeted packages. Package A, for the press. I drafted an anonymous email to the editor of a major financial news website and several tech blogs. Attached was a highly sensitive internal document, a detailed feasibility study proving that the acquisition target Marcus had championed was actually insolvent. The subject line: Executive Marcus Sterling suppressed fraudulent data for personal gain, full details enclosed. I scheduled the email to send out on Friday morning, the day Marcus would be meeting his lawyer and Audrey. Package B, for Talia's clients. I used the list of Talia's largest corporate clients I had found on her laptop. I drafted a separate, anonymous email that went to the CEO of each firm. This email contained links to the public records detailing the stock halt at Marcus's company and, more damningly, included one of the most flirtatious text exchanges with Victor from Miami, strategically cropped to show only her betrayal and the phrase, "Client, dinner my ass." The subject line was, Integrity breach, your consultant, Talia Sterling. I scheduled this email for the same Friday morning. The timing was crucial. Friday at 9 a.m., just as the East Coast financial markets opened. It was a coordinated strike that would cause professional devastation for both of them simultaneously. On Thursday, Audrey arrived. She was shocked by the state of the house, the flickering lights, the tense atmosphere, the dark circles under Marcus's eyes. But she saw him as a victim, a man finally fighting for his family. I held my daughter close, a genuine warmth spreading through me. "Thank you for coming, sweetie. Your father would be so proud that you're standing up for what's right." I didn't mention my role. I simply let her believe she was rescuing the family from Talia's clutches. Friday morning came. Marcus and Audrey left early to meet the lawyer. I sat alone in the quiet house, waiting for the digital fallout. At 9:05 a.m., my phone buzzed with news alerts. The financial sites were screaming. Marcus Sterling was trending on Twitter. His company issued a terse statement: immediate termination of M. Sterling for gross professional misconduct. Minutes later, I got a frantic, tearful call from a friend of Talia's, someone who was high up in her firm. "Beatrice, what is going on?" "The CEO of Pharmatech just called. They dropped all contracts. Talia's clients are pulling out. They got some insane email about an affair and Marcus's fraud. The Gilded Compass is finished." I feigned shock and disbelief. "Oh my heavens! That poor girl." I knew she was stressed, but by noon, the house was a disaster zone. Talia, her Miami trip cut short by a panicked call from her assistant, arrived back at the house, pale and furious, just minutes after Marcus and Audrey returned from the lawyer's office. They met in the foyer. Marcus, the terminated corporate fraud, standing with Audrey, the court plaintiff facing Talia, the exposed adulterer with no clients. "You!" Marcus shrieked, pointing at Talia. "You paid the notary off! You did this to my presentation to ruin me." "Me? You destroyed your own career. And don't you dare talk about ruin. You sent those emails to my clients. You exposed Victor," Talia screamed, tossing her travel bag onto the floor. "And what is she doing here?" She spat, glaring at Audrey. "Audrey is here to file a petition to invalidate the fraudulent will," Marcus declared, puffing out his chest. "I'm fighting for her inheritance, and I'm going to sue you for everything you've done." Talia laughed, a cold, horrible sound. "Sue me? You don't have a penny. And who do you think you are? You were just as complicit in changing the will as I was. I told you exactly what to do." They were consuming each other. They had completely forgotten about me. I watched them for a moment, letting their venom fill the air. Then I spoke, my voice cutting through their noise, clear and sharp. "Enough," I commanded. They both froze, turning to look at me, surprised by the authority in my tone. I looked directly at Marcus. "You are no longer welcome in this house, Marcus. You defrauded your family, you betrayed your father's memory, and you tried to erase your sister's future. You have 24 hours to vacate this property." Then I looked at Talia. "And you, dear, committed adultery on my carpet and stole from my accounts. Your firm is gone. Your reputation is ruined. You have 24 hours to vacate this property as well." They stared at me dumbfounded. "You can't do that, Mom. I have power of attorney." Marcus sputtered. I smiled, a thin, knowing smile. "No, dear. You had power of attorney? I went to the bank yesterday morning before your lawyer's appointment and revoked it. You'll find a notification waiting for you in your email. And as for the house? Your father, Samuel, and I signed a simple, ironclad tenant-at-will agreement with you when you moved in. It allowed us to remove you at any time with 24 hours notice for breach of terms, which, in your case, include financial fraud, undue influence, and creating a hostile environment." I walked to the safe in the living room, the one Marcus and Talia had installed, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The signed, legal agreement they had never read. "This is my house," I finished, my voice like ice. "You were both a disappointment, and I have revoked your tenancy. Now get out." The look of realization that dawned on their faces, the understanding that I was not the victim, but the mastermind behind their complete and total destruction, was the most satisfying moment of my entire 72 years. The final act was ready to begin. The silence that followed my pronouncement was the most absolute sound I have ever heard. Marcus and Talia stood frozen, the shock of total defeat rendering them mute. Their faces were mirrors of their ruined lives. Marcus's was gray with the realization that he'd been fighting an illusion, while Talia's was etched with cold, impotent fury. They realized that their downfall was not a random series of unfortunate events or corporate espionage. It was the meticulous, deliberate work of the frail old woman they'd dismissed. "The tenant-at-will agreement," Talia finally managed, her voice shaking with disbelief. "That was for after the will was settled." "A contingency! It was effective the day you moved in," I corrected calmly, gesturing toward the paper in my hand. "Your initialed copy is in the file cabinet in the den. You were too busy measuring the living room for a new sectional to read the fine print. Your father and I always planned ahead for Marcus's financial indiscretions. We just updated the document to include Talia." Marcus lunged forward, his face contorted. "You witch! You planned this! You hacked my presentation! You sent those texts." "Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous level. "I simply rearranged the furniture you left out. You provided the file of corporate fraud, and Talia provided the proof of her adultery. I merely handed the key to the stage manager. Now, I suggest you take your 24 hours and ensure you leave nothing behind that belongs to Audrey or me." Audrey, who had been watching the entire exchange with widening eyes, finally stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on my arm, her expression a mix of horror and dawning admiration. "Mom, the will petition. The lawyer, do we still need to go forward with that?" "Yes, we do," I replied, turning to her. "Because Marcus and Talia will not simply walk away. They will try to sue for the equity they've invested in the house, claiming their updates were an improvement. We need the court to formally declare the new will null and void due to undue influence and financial fraud. Marcus, as the repentant witness, will confirm that Talia manipulated him into tricking me. The petition will force a settlement. It was a beautiful final maneuver. Marcus, in his desperate attempt for revenge on Talia, would have to testify against the fraudulent will he orchestrated, thus guaranteeing Audrey's 40% share was legally protected. He would have played the crucial role in destroying his own scheme. I turned back to the defeated pair. "Go. The lawyers will handle the rest. I want no more words from either of you in my home." They didn't argue further. The fight had left them. Marcus stumbled toward the master suite, presumably to pack his expensive clothes and plot a baseless legal counterattack. Talia, however, paused at the doorway, her cold eyes fixing on mine. "You have been living here, watching us, pretending to be frail," she stated, not as an accusation, but as a realization. "How long, Beatrice? How long have you been planning this?" I allowed myself one final genuine moment of honesty. "Since the day your husband convinced me to sign those papers, dear. Since the day you moved your designer luggage into the guest room, I have always protected my home, and I have always protected my children. You simply forgot that a mother's patience is a fragile thing, but a mother's love is a steel trap." She gave a bitter, almost admiring nod, and then walked out. The next day, I changed the locks. The quiet that settled over the house was different this time. It wasn't the heavy, grieving silence left by Samuel's death. It was a peaceful, cleansing quiet. The flickering lights stopped immediately. I had simply tightened the loose wire in the breaker panel myself, a 5-minute fix that had caused 2 weeks of psychological torture. The smart TV played its financial news channel without interruption. The house was mine again. Audrey stayed for a week. She helped me clean out Marcus and Talia's belongings, which we boxed up and sent to the address of Marcus's corporate lawyer. Audrey was still processing the depth of the deception and the scale of my retaliation, but mostly, she was relieved and profoundly grateful. "Mom," she said one afternoon, hugging me tightly, "you didn't have to put my name back on the will. You could have just protected your own money." "Your father and I didn't raise you to be a victim, Audrey," I said, smoothing her hair. "And the house was always meant to be shared. That's what family does." The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Marcus's corporate troubles made him a pariah. His testimony was worthless, and his financial accounts were frozen. Talia's firm collapsed entirely. The undue influence petition was settled quickly and favorably. The new will was invalidated, and the estate reverted to the original 60-40 split. Audrey received her 40% share of the estate's remaining liquid assets, which was substantial. Marcus received his 60%, but only after his lawyers took a significant cut, and only after he paid me a sizable court-mandated sum for the reinstatement of the original property value from his fraudulent upgrades. He was left with the burden of his ruined career, a massive legal bill, and a divorce from Talia, who was busy trying to salvage her own reputation. My revenge was complete. I didn't end up rich, but I didn't need to be. I was solvent, I was safe, and most importantly, I was home. I sit now in my living room, the late afternoon sun streaming across the polished antique floor. The ceramic hummingbird is back on its shelf, a small, silent trophy. I occasionally see news reports. Marcus is consulting for a low-level tech startup in the suburbs, still fighting his debts. Talia moved back to the East Coast, trying to rebrand herself as a life coach. They are gone from my life. I look at the beautiful old house and I think of Samuel. He built this safe harbor, and I defended it. They thought I was a liability, a loose end to be tied up. They didn't realize that in this game of high-stakes finance and betrayal, the most dangerous player is often the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to remember. I am Beatrice Sterling, 72 years old, and my final chapter is the one where I won.